In this video, I break down the lowest risk, highest reward lever to increase profits and enterprise value of the business that you just bought. That's right, we're talking about pricing. I read 3 of the canonical books on pricing and took notes. And then I got AI to simplify that all down into the single pretty PDF that I'll be going through in this video. In this video, we'll cover why updating your pricing is important, what to do before you update the pricing, how to actually update it, and then holding the line once you've done that. Before we get into it, the reason I'm making this video is one of my goals for Q1 is to update 3 of our portfolio companies' pricing. I work for a company called Beacon. Last year we bought roughly 20 companies, and this year our goal is to buy 45 companies. Basically, this whole video is about this number right here. If you increase price by 5%, this could lead to a 50% increase in your bottom line. And let's go through the quick math here. So let's just say that you're selling units of some item. Let's say it's oranges, for example, and your price per unit is $100, variable cost is $60, and your fixed cost are $30 million. So basically you sell 1 million units for $100, so you're making $100 million top line, and then you subtract $60 million in variable costs, and then $30 million in fixed costs. That leaves you with a profit of $10 million. But if you just increase the price 5%, that means you make $105 million, and then your profit is now $15 million. And this is a 50% increase in profit. So just this small change, 5% in pricing, can actually lead to a dramatic effect on the bottom line. And perhaps a scarier version of this is if you cut prices 20% to win more deals. You don't actually need 20% more volume to break even. You need to double the volume. And this is a big reason why just throwing out discounts willy-nilly is a bad idea. So if you're going in and you want to change pricing and you're speaking to the founders, they're likely going to push back and say, we can't raise prices, we'll lose customers. And that's likely true. They will lose some customers. But the question is not, how do you try and keep all of your customers? The question is, how many customers can you actually afford to lose? So if you increase prices by 5% and 10% of your customers leave, which is still pretty high, you'll still be ahead on profit margin in most margin structures. So you can basically do the math for your specific portfolio company, show them the numbers, and this will hopefully put their mind at ease. So here's just a quick example. If you're a company that does 20 million of revenue with $2 million in operating profit and you increase price by 1%, that's 200K, and that's a 10% profit increase. So that was a quick overview of why updating pricing actually matters and how it can have a dramatic impact on your bottom line. But before you jump in there and start changing prices, it's important to understand what the customers actually value. And the reason that this is important is because in building any company or any startup, you eventually build out a ton of features. And you might think that a lot of them are extremely important. But once you actually speak to customers, you realize that a small minority of the features that are available actually account for most of the value. And this is important when you think about structuring the pricing that we'll talk about later. One way to do this is to conduct willingness to pay research. Basically, you just interview 15 to 25 customers before you actually change anything. And these are the questions that you can ask. So, what price would you consider this a good deal for you? When would you start to question whether it's actually worth it? And where would you actually say, absolutely not, this is not worth it at all? And then if you're thinking about features, you can talk about, hey, if we remove this feature, how much less would you expect to pay? And the reason this is pretty interesting is it basically shows you which features actually drive most of the value. And then every time they give you an answer, you just follow up with why to try and understand the rationale and the calculus behind what they're talking about. Another thing you can do is interview the sales team. And you basically have 2 questions that you can ask them. What do they do if a customer pushes back on price? What do you actually say and what do you actually do? And then have you lost deals because of price? And what do you actually do in those scenarios? What you might find is that they're losing deals they should lose. That's fine. These are price sensitive customers who you don't want anyway. And then also unnecessarily discounting customers who have paid full price. This is perhaps the best way. So that's for existing customers and figuring out what actually drives value in the product and trying to figure out like their base case pricing and then like their upper limit. But another way to think about this is identifying the next best alternative. Basically, what does your customer do if they weren't going to buy for you? In software, the likelihood is they're either going to use a competitor, use a manual spreadsheet or something that they built internally, hire someone internally, or do nothing, let the problem lie. If it's in services, they might bring it in-house, use offshore labor, start automating it, or use one of your competitors. And once you understand what the alternatives are, then you can start quantifying them. and thinking about, hey, how much does it actually cost if they use an alternative? So for example, if our feature saves 10 hours a week, they'll hire someone at $25 an hour. That's $13,000 a year in value to the customer. Reducing errors by 50%. If it costs $500 to fix and you get 20 per year, that's $5,000. Basically, you do this and you get to a number that is quantifiable in value. So let's say in this case, it's $20,600. If you're charging $6,000 a year for this, you have a lot of room to actually increase your price because it's still so much more valuable for your customer. But you might find that you're priced appropriately and you're charging, let's say, $18,000 an hour. And so you are priced appropriately, but you just need to communicate your value better. Tactically, one thing you can do is build a pricing calculator for your sales team. And whenever they're negotiating with potential customers, you can say, hey, actually, for customers like you, they typically do this and it costs them Y, and we're able to save them X amount of dollars per year. And so that's why we're charging Z. And that's why we think it represents fair value. The likelihood is that customers know this already, which is why they're speaking to you in the first place. And so just being able to actually quantify that, and especially if you have real examples from clients that are similar to them, can help get them over the line. Real quick, in part 3, basically what you want to do after you've done your willingness to pay survey or interviews with these customers, you want to segment them, not by size, but actual willingness to pay. Most people do small, medium, large customers or enterprise customers because it's usually a good proxy for their willingness to pay. But there are some people that are in different buckets that are willing to pay more. And if you're able to segment them, you can give them tailored pricing such that you are capturing more of the value that you create for your customers. And practically the way that you do this is you cluster customers by their must-haves versus their nice-to-haves, the price range that they cite as acceptable, and the problems that they were trying to solve. Basically, you'll end up with some natural groupings, and then you can give them names based on that. So people that are price sensitive, people that are willing to pay based on performance, and then partnership buyers. One more thing to mention here is if you've never done a pricing update before, or if you worked on pricing for businesses, typically you're used to, as a consumer, if you go out and buy, let's say, toothpaste, and you buy toothpaste in bulk, you will get a discount for buying more packs of toothpaste, but this is not how it works in business. If you're selling more things or to a larger client with high willingness to pay, you're actually giving them more value. And so you end up charging them more for it. And the way to think about this is usage volume. High usage equals more value, which equals a higher price. Part 4 is perhaps the most interesting part here. In part 4, we'll talk about restructuring the offering before you actually raise the prices. And the reason that we're going to talk about this is because it's a pretty interesting way to actually make more money without your customers feeling like you've raised prices on them. And in some cases, you can increase revenue 20 to 30% without actually raising the listing prices, just by changing the structure of what you offer. So let's talk about a specific example. In one of the books, they cite a telecom study. They had a $25 a month plan and a $60 a month plan. In that scenario, 78% chose the $25 a month plan. And so their average revenue per customer per month was $32.80. Instead of increasing the prices, they just introduced a third tier, which is the $50 plan in the middle. And just by introducing the new feature, 44% chose the cheapest option, down from 78%. And the average revenue jumped to $40.50, which is a 23% increase with no price hike, just by introducing the middle tier. So that's one way to do it. Just introduce a new tier of pricing. A different way is by changing the features that are included with different prices. So an internet company had 60% of customers on their cheapest tier. What they did is they had a basic tier, let's just call it $29 a month, don't have the details here, and a $79 a month plan and $149 a month plan. So they basically stripped the features from the basic tier. They raised the mid-tier to $99 and the top tier to $199. Basically, just the psychological threshold. $79 versus $99 likely doesn't make a huge difference for someone buying something in this price range. And then they also introduced a $299 premium tier. And the result is they had a 36% increase in average revenue per user and 29% increase in monthly recurring revenue. And so half of it came from restructuring and half of it came from behavioral pricing. So the reason why is by reducing the basic offering, they were able to make the standard offer look way more attractive because now it's actually something that they cared about. And by introducing the higher tier, the $299 premium tier, made the $99 and $199 tier look way more attractive and worth way more because they were anchoring on this high price point. In this table, we have a concise breakdown of how you can think about pricing your different tiers. So if you have the basic tier, just the core functionality only, self-service with limited or no support. In the professional tier, the tier above that, it's your 2 to 3 features that your willingness to pay survey showed mattered the most, and you want roughly 50% of your customers to land here. And then enterprise is basically everything, plus dedicated support, plus SLAs, and this is where you can price for value if you're speaking to your clients. The likelihood is if they want SLAs and premium support, you can actually figure out what this is worth to them in your discovery phase. You can understand the process that they go through right now, what their alternatives are, and so you can price more appropriately in that case. All right, I'll just give you one quick example, the software example, not the services example. You'll be able to read the PDF yourself. Let's say you have a starter, $500 a month, and an enterprise, which is $2,000 a month. What you want to do is just add another tier in the middle, $1,200 a month, with the features that you already have. And so when you actually speak to enterprise clients, what they would have done in the first scenario is just negotiate you down to $1,500. But when they see this pricing for the tier below that, $1,200, they'll now anchor on that. Because the previous tier is $1,200, they're now getting a steal at $1,500, and the likelihood is you can prevent them from discounting so low. And then the final thing here is that some customers won't buy because they don't like how you charge, not what you charge. So for example, some people might not like the per seat fee, some people might not like the flat fee. If you have a per seat fee, companies that are growing and will continue to add seats don't like that because it's going to get continually more and more expensive. But if you're a small company, but it is a high flat fee, they're going to be pissed off. And success-based pricing, some people will want that because your success is tied to their success, but other people will not want that because their incentive is to grow, and they know that every time they grow, you will grow as a result too, or they'll be paying you this cost that will continue to increase and increase. So you can't make everybody happy, but what you want to do here is do right by your portfolio company and make sure that you're actually capturing the appropriate amount of value that you create for your customers. All right. Part 5 is implementing the actual price changes. The first one, this is quite an interesting one, is the invisible price increases. Basically, this hinges on the fact that not all prices are equally visible to your customers. And this is a bit sneaky. A regional bank raised their prices on line items that their customers don't notice. Basically, they obscured fees buried on page 4 of the schedule, and they were able to generate hundreds of thousands of dollars in new revenue with 0 complaints. I don't know if I necessarily advocate for this style, but this is a way that people have made more money in the past, and so I thought it was worth mentioning. The way that you do this is you pull up your price list and you identify every line item, and you figure out which fees the customers complain about, which ones do they never mention, so basically which ones they never notice, and the ones that they never mention or never notice are the ones that are candidate for increases. In software, if you have an API company, this might mean increasing your overage charges for an API, and so if they're already paying you $50,000 a month, if their overage charges now increase by $200 a month, they're not likely to hassle you over that. Another way to implement new pricing, and perhaps the best way, is to do it on new customers first without disturbing the existing customers. And this is low risk because you're not actually risking your existing customers that you already have. And so whatever pricing strategy that you come up with, the new prices, you do that for new customers only. Yeah, and the benefit of that is existing customers don't see it, sales reps get practice, and you're able to collect data on the new close rates. And if you're able to make revenue that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to, then this is a success, and you're able to roll that out across the board. And then 3, which we've already talked about, is introducing a premium tier. Give them a reason to pay more, so that might mean better service without actually increasing the pricing. Basically, customers that want to pay more for different things are willing and able to do that. And if you're doing this for existing customers, especially the ones that have been with you for a while, you want to be conscious of how you actually do that. One way to do that is if you have customers that are on annual contracts and you want to give them 90 days heads up, hey, we're going to increase pricing, and we're doing it for XY reason. We've introduced all of this, new features, and so we think that the software is now more valuable than it was before. Another thing that you can do is grandfather pricing for the first year. And so one way to frame this is like, hey, we're increasing pricing. Don't worry, it's not going to affect you right now. All of our new customers, they're going to be the ones affected.
And to thank you for being a great customer, we're going to grandfather you in for the next year. And so the new prices go into effect today, but you're not affected for the next 12 months. And this is if you totally restructure pricing considerably, so it doesn't really match the existing pricing that you have. You want to position it as a new packaging to service their needs better. And you want to map your existing customers to their current usage such that you can transfer them to the correct plan. And then also you want to give them ample heads up before their pricing migration. And this is one way to massage that to the founders. We're not asking your customers to accept 20% higher prices overnight. We're basically bringing on new customers to reasonable pricing, and eventually over time we'll migrate your existing customers. So this is you as a private equity firm or the holding company messaging to the founders that you're actually speaking to. Okay, so you've rolled out pricing, but now you need to actually hold the line. If you've updated your pricing strategy, one thing that can happen is that it can wilt in a single day. This is an example given in one of the books, where a sales manager panicked about a competitor and the CEO approved blanket discounts across Europe. And if your first instinct is to discount when you have an issue, that becomes a reflex and it's hard to stop it. So one Latin American telecom company instituted a rule which worked incredibly well. Before any price cut, the team must propose 3 non-price actions and explain why the cut is superior. A board member said this simple rule had the highest impact we've ever seen. So it's basically a one-pager with 3 alternatives to discounting. So more service, faster implementation, extended payment terms, case study participation, etc. One way to do this is create a one-page approval form. So 3 alternatives that they can do instead of discounting: analysis of the competitor reaction if you cut, and the calculation of profit impact of the customer lifetime, not just this deal, if they discount. The reason a one-pager approval form like this actually works is it creates massive friction for the sales reps. They'll just be like, it's just so much work for me to actually get this discount approved. I'd rather just hold the line in this conversation. And it also makes them familiar with the alternatives that they can use. If you are able to give 1 or 2 times to your customer in terms of more service, faster implementation, the likelihood is they'll accept the price that you've given them. And calculating what the discount will have in terms of the customer lifetime value is important for the sales reps to understand, hey, if we discount by this amount, this is how much money we're actually leaving on the table. And then you want to create like a discount authority matrix in terms of who can approve what discounts. So if it's up to 10%, a rep can do it. Up to 20% needs sales manager approval. If it's 20% or above, a VP needs to approve it with justification. Another way to do this is customers have a different perception of value than you do. As the business, you have a lot more levers at your disposal. And so if you do have to offer a concession, it's better to offer goods and services instead of cash discounts. Because the customer, in their mind, they anchor on the retail value, not the actual variable cost to make the good. So for example, furniture, offering an extra piece of furniture instead of a percentage discount. So the customer thinks of that as like, wow, I've got a $500 piece of furniture, but the manufacturer's cost is only $200. So you're only giving up $200 as the furniture manufacturer. An alternative would have been giving them $500 cash discount, and you as the manufacturer would have lost out on $500 in margin. There's another example in the PDF of the way to do this. Basically, this matters because if you continuously discount, you erode your price level and your ability to hold the line. And so if you're always 20% of everything, you basically become the discount option. And once you're the discount option for anything, you can never escape that. And this, just at a high level, this section touches on rewiring the incentives for the sales team. Instead of just being compensated on revenue or bookings, they'll continue to keep discounting because they're not getting disincentivized for doing so. And so if you are discounting, then your sales reps should be getting a lower commission because of that discount. And also, you should make average discount rate a visible metric in the weekly pipeline reviews. So it's top of mind for them, and also they're disincentivized from decreasing prices. Okay, so this is just some founder management if you're working with a portfolio company and they have reservations about increasing the prices on their customers, especially since a lot of these customers they've likely known for 5 years, 10 years. And if they're in a small industry, they likely all know each other. So here are just some common objections and how to handle them. So if they lose customers, you can actually just quantify that. If you lose 5% of customers but increase prices, you're still ahead. Another objection might be that customers buy on price, and for some goods this is true. In commodity goods it depends on the company, but if it's not a company like that, then you can bring up Porsche and Apple. Basically, people pay based on value. If we're losing on price, basically that's a perception and a value communication problem, not a pricing issue. And we've always done it this way. Actually, I don't know if I would say that that's why we're here, unless the case is that the company that you're buying is distressed. I wouldn't actually say this. Perhaps what I might say is, what would I say? I would perhaps talk about, yes, you've always done it this way, but try and show them how much money that they're actually leaving on the table, and if they have like an earnout or something like that, how this can help them actually hit that goal. And also the fact that it won't actually affect their customers that much. They won't be pissed off, they won't be upset. And another way to do this is by showing them how much prices have increased for other services and goods, whether that's in the industry or just general consumer goods in terms of inflation. So that's what I would say. I wouldn't actually say what this says in the document. Yeah, another way is to frame it by giving customers more options, more choices, not just raising prices. So you're giving them new tiers, new pricing plans, and also new features. And companies are entitled to the profit from the value they create. You've done all this work for 5+ years, you should be able to capture some of the value, and so should your employees. If a customer is getting 20K of value from you and they're only paying you 6K, asking them for 10K is not price gouging. You're actually just getting a fairer exchange for the value that you create. So that's an overview of how to update pricing once you've bought a company. If you like this video, you'll also like the video that I did on Bending Spoons, breaking down their entire strategy of how they think about buying companies and then also improving them over time.